Chapter 1. The only rule: Larry Helm liked Saturdays because they told the truth. They showed him what held when no one was watching. When there were no meetings, no obligations, no carefully worded promises. Just time and intention. That was how you tested a foundation, by walking on it when you didn't have to. He stood in the backyard with grass clippings stuck to his jeans, the late morning sun warming the back of his neck. The lawn wasn't perfect, but it was even. He shut off the mower, listening for a moment to the sudden quiet. Inside, the house hummed with familiar life, voices, laughter, the clink of ice in glasses. Shelly had her friends over. That, in itself, wasn't a problem. Larry wiped his hands on a rag and headed inside, already thinking about oil changes and grocery lists. The future didn't overwhelm him. It organized him. He poured himself a glass of water in the kitchen, took a long drink, and that's when he heard it. "I just don't want you waking up one day and realizing you settled." The voice belonged to Lauren. It carried easily, confident, practiced, sharpened by years of being listened to. Larry paused, glass still in his hand. Kathy responded, softer but no less pointed. "You've been together so long. Sometimes people stay because it's comfortable, not because it's right." There was a brief silence before Shelly spoke. "I didn't settle." Her voice was calm, but Larry knew her well enough to hear the effort behind it. He exhaled slowly. This wasn't concern. Concern asked questions and waited for answers. This was erosion, small, repeated, meant to wear something down over time. Larry stepped into the dining room, then the living room beyond it. The three women sat close together on the couch, glasses of wine balanced casually, bodies angled inward like a closed circle. When they noticed him, surprise flickered across their faces, followed almost immediately by smiles that arrived too late to be sincere. "Hey," Shelly said, a touch too brightly. "You're done already?" "Taking a break," Larry replied easily. He took another sip of water and leaned against the armchair across from them. For a moment, no one spoke. Larry looked at all three of them, then set his glass down carefully. "I caught the tail end of that conversation," he said. Shelly's shoulders tensed. "Larry," he lifted one hand, not sharply, just enough to pause her. His voice remained even. "I understand wanting to look out for your friend. That makes sense. But I'm not going to sit quietly while jealousy gets dressed up as concern in my house." The room went very still. Lauren blinked. Kathy's lips parted, then pressed together. Larry continued, unhurried. "You're important to Shelly. That makes you important to me. I've respected that for 6 years. I've listened. I've hosted. I've made room." He shifted his weight, meeting each of their eyes in turn. "What I won't do is let you question my worth in my own relationship as if I'm not sitting right here." Kathy swallowed. "We weren't saying you weren't. You were," Larry said gently. "You just didn't use those words." Shelly looked at him, torn between relief and alarm. "They're just worried about me." "I know," he said, finally turning to her. His expression softened. "And I love that you're loved. But this crossed a line." He faced Lauren and Kathy again. "I've treated Shelly with respect and consistency. She chose to marry me. That wasn't a fluke or a lack of options." Lauren shifted, defensive heat rising in her eyes. "We're just saying she deserves everything." "So do you," Larry replied. "Which is why I find this so disappointing." That word landed harder than anger. He stood and began pacing slowly, hands loose at his sides. "For 6 years, I've listened to the stories, the strategies, the complaints, different men, same ending. And I've stayed out of it because it wasn't my place." He stopped in front of them. "But now it is." Silence stretched. "You keep chasing the same kind of man and act surprised when it falls apart," he said, blunt but controlled. "At some point, that stops being bad luck." Kathy's eyes dropped to her glass. "I'm not saying you're bad people," Larry continued. "I'm saying your pattern isn't working. And trying to pull Shelly out of a healthy relationship because you're scared of being left behind isn't friendship." Shelly's breath caught. "Larry, please." He turned to her, sadness flickering across his face. "I put up with this because it didn't touch us before. Now it does." He looked back at her friends. "So here's how this goes. You stop undermining our relationship. You respect the boundaries in this house. And Shelly," he nodded to her, "you remind them those boundaries matter." They both nodded quickly, shame replacing defensiveness. Larry took a breath. "Then I'm going to fix the rest." Lauren looked up, startled. "Fix how?" "I'm going to introduce you to men who are serious about their lives," he said. "Men who want partners, not distractions." Kathy stared at him. "After all this, you do that?" "Yes," Larry said simply. "Because the alternative is cutting you out. And I'd rather build something better." He picked up his glass again. "But I won't make myself look bad. You don't get to treat good men like they're auditioning." Shelly watched him go, heart pounding, as he headed back toward the yard. The door closed behind him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lauren whispered, "I think we're terrified." Shelly nodded, tears in her eyes. "So was I, until I wasn't." Outside, Larry restarted the mower. The foundation, he knew, was strong. Now it was time to reinforce the rest. Chapter 2. Aftershocks, the mower droned steadily outside, its rhythm oddly comforting. Shelly sat on the edge of the couch long after the sound faded into the distance, hands folded tightly in her lap. Lauren and Kathy sat beside her, the space between them smaller than usual, not with closeness but with unease. I didn't think he'd hear us, Kathy said finally. Shelly didn't look at her. You didn't think about him at all. Lauren opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her bravado, the thing she wore like armor, had cracked. We were just talking. No, Shelly said quietly. You were projecting. The word hung there, heavier than Shelly had intended, but she didn't take it back. 6 years of patience had earned her honesty. Kathy rubbed her palms against her thighs. We're scared. Shelly turned then, really looked at them. Of what? Lauren let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped for years. Of being the only ones left. Shelly's throat tightened. You're not being left behind. It feels like it, Kathy said. You're getting married. You have this solid thing. And we're still swiping, still guessing, still hoping the next one won't disappoint us. Shelly nodded slowly. I didn't get lucky, she said. I chose carefully, over and over again. Lauren frowned. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, Shelly replied. It's intentional. They sat in silence again, this time softer. Outside, Larry shut off the mower and leaned on it for a moment, staring across the yard. The grass was even, predictable, honest. People weren't like that, but the principle still applied. Ignore small problems long enough and they became structural. He went inside, washed his hands and changed his shirt. When he returned to the living room, the atmosphere had shifted. Less defensive, more fragile. Shelly stood as soon as she saw him. Hey, he replied, searching her face. You okay? She nodded. We talked. Larry glanced at Lauren and Kathy. They both looked exhausted. Good, he said. That matters. Kathy cleared her throat. We owe you an apology. Larry held up a hand. Apologies only matter if they come with changes. We know, Lauren said quietly. We crossed a line. Larry nodded once. Yes. Shelly watched him closely. This was the man she was marrying. Not loud, not cruel, but immovable when it counted. Can we ask you something? Kathy said. That depends, Larry replied evenly. Why didn't you just tell us to leave? Larry considered that. Because Shelly loves you, and because I don't believe in burning bridges when you can reinforce them. Lauren let out a humorless laugh. You really think we're fixable? I think patterns are fixable, Larry said. People don't change unless they want to, but they do change when the cost of staying the same gets too high. Shelly reached for his hand. He squeezed it gently. Later that night, after Lauren and Kathy left with awkward hugs and sincere promises, the house felt different. Quieter, but not empty. Shelly curled up beside Larry on the couch, her head resting against his shoulder. I'm sorry you had to step in. I didn't have to, he said. I chose to. She tilted her head to look at him. You didn't even hesitate. No, he said, because disrespect doesn't get a grace period. She smiled faintly. You scared them. I scared you too. She nodded. A little. He kissed the top of her head. Good. Fear isn't the enemy. Silence is. They sat there, fingers intertwined, until Shelly spoke again. You meant what you said, didn't you? About introducing them to better men. Larry smiled to himself. I already know too. Shelly pulled back. You what? He shrugged. Caleb from work. Marcus from the gym. Her eyes widened. You've been planning this. I've been observing, he corrected. There's a difference. She laughed softly. You're impossible. Effective, he replied. She studied him, emotion thick in her chest. You didn't have to take that on. I did, he said gently. Because I'm not just marrying you. I'm marrying into your world. And I protect what I commit to. Shelly leaned into him, her voice barely above a whisper. I love you. I know, Larry said. And I love you enough to be uncomfortable when it matters. Outside, the lawn sat neatly trimmed under the fading light. Inside, the foundation held. And somewhere between fear and honesty, something new had begun to take shape. Chapter 3. The men in question. Larry believed introductions worked best when they didn't announce themselves as introductions. People behaved differently when they thought they were being evaluated. They performed. They postured. They tried to sell the most polished version of themselves instead of showing the one that actually had to live with its own decisions. So when he invited Lauren and Kathy to a casual Sunday afternoon barbecue, he didn't frame it as anything other than food and people and a reason to get out of the house. Shelly noticed, of course. She always noticed. You're being suspiciously vague, she said that morning, standing barefoot in the kitchen, while Larry shaped burger patties with methodical care. I'm being efficient, he replied. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, smiling. You invited my friends, bought extra food, and suddenly you're grilling like it's a holiday. Larry glanced up at her. Is that a complaint? No, she said quickly. I'm impressed. He smirked. Good. By the time Lauren and Kathy arrived, the The backyard smelled like charcoal and cut grass. The atmosphere was deliberately relaxed. Folding chairs, music low enough to talk over, nothing curated. Caleb showed up first. He was tall without being imposing, broad-shouldered, and dressed plainly in jeans and a gray t-shirt. He brought a six-pack of craft beer and immediately asked where he could help. "Grab a chair," Larry said. "You're off duty." Caleb grinned. "I don't know how to do that." "That tracks," Larry replied. Marcus arrived 10 minutes later, helmet tucked under his arm, hair still slightly damp from the gym. He shook Larry's hand firmly, nodded politely at Shelly, and offered to set up the table without being asked. Shelly raised an eyebrow at Larry. He didn't look at her. Lauren and Kathy arrived together, sunglasses on, energy cautious. They froze briefly when they noticed two unfamiliar men already there. Shelly greeted them with hugs. "Come on in. Drinks are on the table." Introductions were simple. Names only. No context. No expectations. Larry watched from the grill as the dynamics formed. Lauren gravitated toward Marcus almost immediately, drawn by confidence and physical presence. Kathy lingered near Caleb, curiosity warring with habit. "So how do you all know each other?" Lauren asked Marcus, leaning casually against the table. "Gym," Marcus replied. Larry kept showing up at 5 in the morning like a man with something to prove. Larry snorted. "I was trying to avoid people." "And yet," Shelly said, handing him a plate, "here you are hosting." Kathy smiled faintly at Caleb. "What about you?" "Work," Caleb said. "Larry's the only person I know who reads contracts for fun." "That's not true," Larry said. "I tolerate them." Conversation flowed awkwardly at first, then eased. Larry noticed Kathy listening more than talking, asking questions instead of steering the conversation. Lauren, on the other hand, defaulted to charm, quick humor, teasing comments, testing boundaries. Marcus didn't bite. "So," Lauren said at one point, smiling brightly, "are you the commitment type or more of a go-with-the-flow guy?" Marcus took a sip of water, unfazed. "Depends what you mean by flow." She laughed. "You know, no labels, no pressure." He shrugged. "I like pressure. It means something's worth holding." That gave her pause. Across the yard, Kathy and Caleb were talking quietly about travel. Not the glamorous kind, road trips, camping mishaps, places that required patience. "You don't get bored?" Kathy asked. "Of staying?" Caleb replied. "No, I get bored of chaos." She considered that. "That's different. Is that bad?" She shook her head slowly. "I don't know yet." Larry flipped burgers, pretending not to listen while absorbing everything. By the end of the afternoon, nothing had exploded. No sparks flew. No dramatic declarations were made, which Larry considered a success. As people began to leave, Marcus thanked Shelly for the food and nodded at Lauren. "Nice meeting you." "Likewise," she said, watching him walk away with a thoughtful expression she hadn't worn in years. Caleb lingered, helping clean up without being asked. Kathy hesitated, then spoke. "Would you maybe want to grab coffee sometime?" He smiled, surprised but pleased. "I'd like that." When the yard finally emptied, Shelly collapsed into a chair, laughing softly. "You're sneaky." Larry handed her a drink. "Effective." She studied him. "You didn't say a word." "I didn't need to." She sipped, then nodded toward the gate where Lauren and Kathy had left. "You think it worked?" "I think it started something," Larry said. "Which is all you can do." That night, Shelly found Lauren sitting on her couch, unusually quiet. "He didn't chase me," Lauren said finally. Shelly raised an eyebrow. "Is that new?" "Yes," Lauren admitted. "And I hated it. And I think I needed it." Kathy texted later, "Coffee tomorrow." "I'm nervous." Shelly smiled at her phone. Larry watched her from across the room. "No rescues," he said gently. "I know," she replied. "They have to choose." He nodded. "So do we. Every day." She crossed the room and kissed him, slow and certain. "I choose you." "I know," Larry said again. "That's why this works." Outside, the night settled in quietly. No fireworks, just foundations doing what they were built to do. Chapter 4. Mirrors don't lie. Kathy had not been this nervous about coffee since her first job interview out of college. She arrived 10 minutes early and chose a seat near the window, facing the door. Old habit. Control the variables. Know the exits. Her phone sat face down on the table, ignored for once. When Caleb walked in, jacket slung over one shoulder, expression relaxed but alert. Her stomach tightened in a way she didn't immediately distrust. "That's new," she murmured to herself. He spotted her, smiled, and waved before approaching. No hesitation. No scanning the room for better options. "Hi," he said. "Thanks for meeting me." "Thank you for coming," Kathy replied, then winced internally. "Too formal." Caleb chuckled softly. "This isn't a deposition, right?" She laughed despite herself. "No, just coffee." "Good," he said, pulling out the chair across from her. "I'm bad under pressure unless it matters." The conversation started carefully, like two people testing ice with their toes. Work, hobbies, the city. Nothing revealing, nothing risky. Then Kathy did something unusual. She told the truth. I have a pattern, she said abruptly, wrapping her hands around her mug. I get bored when things are calm. Caleb didn't interrupt. I think I confuse chaos with chemistry, she continued. And I'm trying not to do that this time. He nodded slowly. I appreciate you saying that. She blinked. You don't want to run? No, he said. But I do want to be clear. Calm doesn't mean passive. It means intentional. She studied him, searching for the catch. There wasn't one. Across town, Lauren was having a very different experience. She had suggested a walk instead of coffee, already annoyed with herself for agreeing to see Marcus again. He hadn't texted. He hadn't flirted. He hadn't chased, which meant she had. Marcus met her at the park entrance, hands in his jacket pockets, posture easy. Hey, she said, a little too sharp. You didn't message. I didn't want to assume, he replied. You said you'd reach out if you wanted to meet again. She frowned. Most guys don't do that. I'm not most guys. They walked in silence for a minute before Lauren spoke. Do you ever worry about ending up alone? Marcus considered the question. Sure, but I worry more about ending up busy and unfulfilled. She scoffed lightly. That sounds rehearsed. It's not, he said calmly. It's just lived in. That irritated her more than any smooth line ever could. Do you like me? She asked suddenly. Marcus stopped walking, turned to face her fully. I don't know you well enough yet, but I respect you, and I'm curious. That's not nothing. Lauren crossed her arms. You're not supposed to say that. He smiled faintly. I'm not supposed to lie either. The mirror he held up wasn't cruel. It was honest, and Lauren hated that she didn't know what to do with it. That night, Shelly and Larry sat at opposite ends of the couch, both pretending to watch television while clearly thinking about other things. They're texting, Shelly said, glancing at her phone. Good, Larry replied. Means they're processing. She studied him. You're very calm about this. I'm calm because this part isn't mine to manage. She nodded. I know. It's just strange. Watching them struggle. Larry turned toward her. You struggled too. You just did it quietly. She smiled ruefully. You noticed. Of course I did. She hesitated, then asked, do you ever worry we made it look too easy? Larry thought about that. We didn't make it look easy. We made it look intentional. Some people mistake that for boring. Shelly laughed softly. Lauren definitely does. The phone buzzed. Kathy, I think I'm learning how to be still. Shelly's eyes filled unexpectedly. That's huge. Larry nodded. It is. A few minutes later, another message came through. Lauren, he didn't fall for my nonsense. Shelly snorted. Progress. Painful progress, Larry said. The next week tested everyone. Kathy nearly canceled a second date when Caleb suggested cooking dinner together instead of going out. The intimacy of it scared her more than any crowded bar ever had. Lauren picked a fight with Marcus over nothing, an offhand comment about schedules, then waited for him to overreact. He didn't. I'm not going to argue to prove I care, Marcus said evenly. If that's what you need, I'm not your guy. She went home furious, and then, for the first time in years, she sat with the feeling instead of running from it. Shelly watched all of this from the inside, a bridge between worlds she no longer fully belonged to. One evening, she said to Larry, I feel like I'm betraying them by not struggling anymore. Larry turned off the sink and dried his hands. You're not betraying them. You're modeling something they didn't think was possible. She leaned against the counter. They're scared. So were you, he reminded her gently. You just didn't let fear steer. She met his eyes. You helped. I didn't save you, he corrected. I walked beside you. That distinction mattered. A lot. The weekend came again, quiet and ordinary. Larry changed the oil in both cars. Shelly reorganized a closet they'd been meaning to get to for months. No drama. No revelations. Just consistency. That evening, Lauren showed up at their door unannounced. Shelly hugged her immediately. Hey! Lauren held on longer than usual. I don't know how to do this, she admitted, voice low. Do what? Choose something that doesn't feel like a roller coaster. Larry watched from the hallway as Shelly led her to the couch. You don't have to choose forever, Shelly said. You just have to choose honestly today. Lauren nodded, eyes wet. I think I've been confusing intensity with intimacy. Larry stepped forward then. A lot of people do. She looked up at him. You weren't wrong. I wasn't trying to be right, he said. I was trying to protect what matters. She swallowed. Thank you for not giving up on us. I didn't, Larry said. But you still have to do the work. She nodded. I am. Mirrors didn't lie. They just reflected what people were finally brave enough to see. And for the first time, all of them were looking straight ahead instead of sideways. Chapter 5. Cracks in the old trio. The first real fracture didn't happen loudly. It happened on a Tuesday night, in a group text that had existed for over a decade and had survived bad dates, breakups, job changes, and more inside jokes than any of them could remember. Lauren typed, deleted, typed again. Lauren. Marcus asked me to dinner Friday. 3 dots appeared almost immediately. Kathy, that's good, right? Lauren stared at the screen longer than she meant to. Lauren, I think so. The pause that followed felt heavier than it should have. Shelly watched the exchange from her end without jumping in. She had learned, slowly and painfully, that timing mattered more than commentary. Kathy, you think so? Lauren, he wants to cook. At his place. Kathy hesitated before responding. Kathy, that's intimate. Lauren felt the familiar itch rise in her chest. The instinct to mock, deflect, turn vulnerability into humor. Instead, she typed, Lauren. Yeah, that's what's freaking me out. The silence that followed wasn't judgmental. It was unsettled. Shelly finally intervened. Shelly, being nervous doesn't mean it's wrong. Lauren set the phone down, heart racing. That should have reassured her. Instead, it made her feel exposed. Kathy's week was quieter, but no less tense. She stood in her kitchen with Caleb, sleeves rolled up, chopping vegetables side by side. No music, no distractions, just the sound of knives against cutting boards and the occasional bump of elbows. This is where I usually bail, Kathy admitted suddenly. Caleb glanced at her. Why? Because it's real, she said. No crowd, no exit. He nodded. You're still here. I know, she said, surprised by her own voice. I'm trying not to panic about it. He smiled gently. You don't have to perform here. That landed harder than any compliment ever had. Later that night, after Caleb left, Kathy sat alone at her table, untouched dessert between her hands, and realized something unsettling. She hadn't checked her phone once during dinner. The cracks widened on Friday. Lauren arrived at Marcus's place dressed carefully, but not provocatively. That alone made her uneasy. She felt stripped of her usual armor. Marcus greeted her with a warm smile and handed her a glass of wine. You okay? She nodded. Just out of practice. With what? Letting things be simple. He studied her for a moment. Simple doesn't mean easy. They cooked together, moved around each other without choreography. At one point, she knocked over a spice jar and laughed too loudly. Relax, he said, amused. The food will survive. She exhaled. You're not impressed by chaos, are you? No, Marcus said calmly. I'm impressed by honesty. That should have been comforting. Instead, Lauren felt cornered. Midway through dinner, she picked a fight. It wasn't about anything important. His work schedule, the fact that he planned weeks ahead, the way he didn't react when she teased him about being predictable. You don't ever just do something reckless? She asked sharply. Marcus set his fork down. Why would I? Because life's short, she snapped. Because planning everything doesn't leave room for excitement. He met her gaze steadily. Or maybe it leaves room for peace. She stood abruptly. I think this was a mistake. Marcus didn't raise his voice, didn't chase her. Okay, he said. If that's how you feel. That was the moment it cracked open. You're not even going to stop me? She demanded. No, he said. I'm not going to convince you to stay if you don't want to. She left furious. At him, at herself, at the quiet truth echoing in her chest. The next morning, Shelly found Lauren sitting on her front steps. She looked wrecked. Shelly didn't ask questions. She just opened the door and pulled her inside. I blew it, Lauren said, voice flat. Shelly handed her coffee. Sit. Lauren dropped onto the couch, head in her hands. He didn't fight me. He didn't argue. He didn't do anything dramatic. Shelly sat beside her. What did you want him to do? Lauren's voice cracked. Prove he cared. Shelly was quiet for a moment. Then gently, he did. Just not the way you're used to. Lauren looked up. I think I sabotage things before they can choose me. Shelly nodded. I used to test Larry too. Lauren blinked. You did. Yes, Shelly admitted. I just didn't call it that. I needed to know he'd stay when it wasn't easy. And he did. He did, Shelly said. But I also had to stop creating emergencies just to feel important. That truth hit home with uncomfortable precision. Across the room, Larry listened from the kitchen, deliberately not inserting himself. This wasn't his conversation to steer. But later, when Lauren finally stood to leave, she stopped in front of him. You were right, she said quietly. Larry met her eyes. About what? I keep choosing intensity over stability, and then blaming the fallout. Larry nodded. Stability isn't passive. It's disciplined. She swallowed. I don't know if I know how to choose it. You don't have to know yet, he said. You just have to stop punishing it. The crack in the trio widened again that night. Kathy texted the group. Kathy, I think I like someone who doesn't make my heart race. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Lauren, must be nice. The words were sharper than Lauren intended. Kathy hesitated. Kathy, it's unfamiliar. Shelly read the exchange, heart heavy. This was the part no one warned you about. The space where growth didn't sync up neatly. Where one person's progress felt like abandonment to another. Shelly called Lauren instead of texting. You okay? Shelly asked. I feel like I'm losing you, Lauren admitted. You're not, Shelly said firmly. But I'm not shrinking back into chaos with you either. The line went quiet. That's the difference now, isn't it? Lauren said softly. Yes, Shelly replied. And I love you too much to pretend otherwise. That weekend, Larry and Shelly argued. It wasn't explosive. It wasn't cruel. It was honest. You're carrying a lot, Larry said. You don't have to manage everyone. Shelly crossed her arms. I'm not managing. I'm caring. There's a line, he said. And you're blurring it. She bristled. So what? I'm supposed to step back? I'm saying you don't have to be the bridge every time, Larry replied. Sometimes people need to feel the gap. Shelly sat with that longer than she liked. Later that night, she admitted, I don't want to outgrow them. Larry took her hands. You're not outgrowing them. You're growing differently. She leaned into him, exhausted. That feels lonely. Sometimes growth is, he said gently. But you're not alone. She smiled faintly. That's the difference. By Sunday, the old trio no longer fit the same way. Not broken, just altered. Lauren texted Marcus an apology she didn't soften with humor. Kathy agreed to a third date without needing reassurance. Shelly sat beside Larry on the porch, watching the sun dip low. The cracks are showing, she said quietly. Larry nodded. Cracks let light in. She laughed softly. You're very calm about all this. He smiled. Because foundations don't panic when walls shift. She squeezed his hand. I'm glad we built ours slowly. So am I, he said. Behind them, inside the house, the future waited. Unfinished, imperfect, and finally honest enough to hold. Chapter 6. The work of choosing. The argument didn't announce itself. It arrived quietly, the way real ones often did, slipping in between dinner and dishes, between routine and rest. Shelly stood at the sink, rinsing plates, while Larry dried them beside her. Their movements were practiced, efficient, a choreography built over years. You've been quiet, Shelly said. Larry placed a plate on the rack. I've been thinking. She waited. He always spoke when he was ready. I'm proud of you, he said finally. But I'm also worried. Her hands paused under the running water. About what? You, he said simply. You're carrying everyone right now. And you don't need to. Shelly turned off the faucet. They're my friends. I know, Larry replied. And I'm not asking you to abandon them. She crossed her arms, already bracing. Then what are you asking? I'm asking you to let them feel the consequences of their choices, he said gently. You can support them without cushioning every fall. Her jaw tightened. You think I'm enabling them. I think you're exhausting yourself. That stung more than she expected. I'm not fragile, Shelly said. I know, Larry replied immediately. That's exactly why I'm saying this. She stepped away from the counter, pacing. If I step back, Lauren will think I'm choosing you over her. Larry set the towel down. You did choose me. That's not a betrayal. That's adulthood. She stopped, looking at him. So now I'm supposed to redraw every relationship I have? No, he said. You're supposed to let them evolve. Or not. That part isn't yours to control. Shelly pressed her lips together, emotion welling. I don't want to lose them. Larry softened. He crossed the space between them and took her hands. You might lose the version of them that depended on chaos. That doesn't mean you lose them entirely. She exhaled shakily. This feels harder than anything we've dealt with. Because this is new, he said. Everything else we built together. This is you learning not to overextend for people who need to stand on their own. She leaned her forehead against his chest. I hate that you're right. He smiled faintly. I hate it too. They stood there for a moment, holding each other, neither trying to win. That was the work. Kathy discovered her own version of the work 2 days later. She sat across from Caleb at a small restaurant, menu untouched. He looked relaxed. She didn't. I almost canceled tonight, she admitted. He nodded. Why didn't you? Because I realized something, she said. I've spent years saying I want stability, but panicking when it shows up. Caleb met her eyes. And now I'm trying to stay, she said quietly. Even when my instincts tell me to run. He smiled, not triumphant, not relieved, just present. That's all I can ask. She swallowed. You're not scared. I am, he admitted. But I'd rather be scared and honest than comfortable and disconnected. That landed deep. Later, Kathy texted Shelly. I think I'm learning how to choose instead of react. Shelly stared at the message for a long time before replying. That's the hardest part. Lauren, meanwhile, sat alone in her apartment, phone in her hand. Marcus hadn't texted since their disastrous dinner. This time, she didn't blame him. She opened a new message and stared at the blank screen. No jokes, no deflection, just truth. I'm sorry, she typed. Panicked. I push when I'm afraid. You didn't deserve that. Her finger hovered. Then she sent it. The reply didn't come immediately, and for once she didn't spiral. She waited. That weekend, Larry and Shelly attended a small engagement party thrown by friends. Nothing extravagant. Just people who knew them well enough to toast their steadiness instead of spectacle. You two make it look easy, someone said. Larry smiled politely. Shelly laughed. It's not easy, Shelly said. It's intentional. Later that night, driving home, Shelly rested her head against the window. I think I understand now, she said softly. Understand what? Why my parents stayed married, she replied. They weren't dramatic. They were disciplined. Larry glanced at her. Discipline isn't romantic in movies. It is in real life, she said. Because it means someone keeps choosing you. He reached for her hand at a red light. I do. Every day. She squeezed back. Me too. Sunday morning, Lauren knocked on their door again. This time she looked steadier. He texted back, she said without preamble. Shelly smiled. And? He said he appreciated the apology, Lauren replied. And that he'd be open to trying again if I was. Larry nodded. And are you? Lauren hesitated, then nodded. Yes, but I don't want to be someone else this time. Larry met her gaze. Then don't be. She smiled faintly. That's terrifying. Growth usually is, Shelly said. Lauren exhaled. I think I'm done chasing fireworks. Larry smiled. Good. Fireworks burn out. She laughed softly. You're very consistent. On purpose, he replied. That evening, Shelly and Larry sat on the porch again. The same place where so many conversations had unfolded. I stepped back today, Shelly said. Just a little. Larry nodded. How did it feel? Uncomfortable, she admitted. But lighter. He kissed her temple. That's how you know it's right. She smiled, watching the sun dip below the horizon. The work of choosing didn't end. But neither did the reward. And for the first time, everyone involved was learning the same lesson. Love wasn't found by accident. It was built, day by day, choice by choice. Chapter 7, Redefining Freedom. Freedom used to mean escape to Lauren. It meant options, open doors, the ability to walk away before anyone could decide she wasn't worth keeping. Freedom was movement, fast, unanchored, exciting. Marcus challenged that definition without ever naming it. They sat across from each other at a small table near the park, sunlight filtering through the trees. This time, Lauren hadn't dressed for impact. No armor, no performance. I don't want to mess this up, she said, fingers wrapped tightly around her cup. Marcus studied her, not with intensity but with care. Then don't try to control it. She huffed a laugh. That's not my strength. I've noticed, he said mildly. She rolled her eyes, then sobered. I keep thinking freedom means not needing anyone. Marcus leaned back slightly. I think freedom means choosing where you stay. That stopped her. You don't feel trapped? She asked. Not when I choose the walls, he replied. Not when I know why they're there. Lauren stared at him. Something unfamiliar unfolding in her chest. Not fireworks, not panic. Clarity. I don't want to run anymore, she said quietly. But I don't know how to stop wanting to. Marcus nodded. You don't have to stop wanting it. You just have to stop obeying it. She laughed softly. You're frustrating. So I've been told. But she was smiling when she said it. Kathy's understanding of freedom shifted more subtly. She and Caleb walked through a quiet neighborhood after dinner, the kind with wide sidewalks and front porches that hinted at long conversations and slow mornings. I always thought freedom was excitement, Kathy said. Now I think it might be peace. Caleb glanced at her. Peace isn't passive. I know, she replied. It's just unfamiliar. He smiled. You don't seem bored. She considered that. I feel grounded. That's not a word people usually complain about. She stopped walking, turning to face him. I don't want to self-sabotage this. I won't let you do it alone, he said. But I won't chase you if you run. Her chest tightened, not with fear, but with responsibility. Good, she said. I don't want to be chased anymore. They stood there for a moment, the future not declared, but present. Shelly watched both stories unfold from a careful distance. She didn't offer advice unless asked. She didn't translate emotions or smooth rough edges. That had been the hardest part, learning when support became interference. One evening, she admitted as much to Larry while they folded laundry together. I feel like I'm failing them, she said. Larry shook his head. You're letting them grow. It feels like abandonment. It's not, he said. It's trust. She paused, holding one of his shirts. I trust you like this. He smiled. Because I earned it. She met his eyes. And because you never confuse freedom with absence. He stepped closer. You're not losing yourself by committing. You're defining yourself. She leaned into him, breath steadying. I wish I'd known that earlier. You knew it when it mattered, he replied. That night, they sat on the porch again, feet propped on the railing, the neighborhood quiet around them. What does freedom mean to you? Shelly asked. Larry didn't answer immediately. It means knowing I could leave, he said finally. And choosing not to. She smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. That's exactly how I feel. The conversation came together the following weekend. Lauren and Kathy sat across from Shelly at the kitchen table, coffee cooling between them. The mood wasn't heavy, but it was serious. I think we've been afraid of the wrong thing, Kathy said. Lauren nodded. We were afraid of settling. But really, we were afraid of being seen long enough to be chosen. Shelly listened, heart full and aching at the same time. I don't want what you have, Lauren said, looking at Shelly. I want something that works for me, and I think I've been running from that. Shelly smiled gently. That's all I ever wanted for you. Kathy exhaled. We might not end up in the same place. You don't have to, Shelly said. We just have to respect where we land. Lauren laughed softly. You're annoyingly healthy now. Shelly grinned. Engagement perk. Larry entered then, setting a plate of pastries on the table. I heard laughter. That's usually a good sign. Lauren looked up at him. You didn't save us. I wasn't trying to, Larry replied. You did the work. Kathy nodded. You just stopped us from tearing each other down. Boundaries do that, he said. They sat together not as they used to be, but as they were becoming. Different, stronger, more honest. That night, as Larry and Shelly prepared for bed, Shelly said softly, I don't feel guilty anymore. Larry smiled. About choosing this life, she said. Choosing us. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. Freedom doesn't disappear when you commit. It sharpens. She kissed him, slow and certain. I'm free with you. He held her close. Me too. Outside, the world continued. Imperfect, unpredictable, alive. Inside, the choice had already been made. And it felt exactly right. Chapter 8. The wedding before the wedding? The dinner wasn't meant to be symbolic. That's what made it matter. Shelly set the table with the good plates, the ones they never used because there was always some imagined future moment they were being saved for. Larry noticed immediately but didn't comment. He just lit the candles without being asked and opened the windows to let the early evening air move through the house. Lauren and Kathy arrived separately this time. That alone marked a shift. They hugged Shelly, greeted Larry with ease that hadn't existed months ago, and settled around the table without jockeying for position. No one rushed to fill the quiet. It settled naturally, like people who no longer needed noise as proof of connection. This feels grown, Kathy said, half laughing as she took her seat. Lauren smirked. Don't get carried away. But there was no edge behind it. Dinner unfolded slowly. Conversation wandered. Work, small annoyances, plans that extended more than a weekend ahead. No one dominated. No one disappeared. At one point, Lauren set her fork down and looked directly at Shelly. I owe you an apology, she said. Shelly blinked. For what? For making your happiness feel like a threat, Lauren replied. I didn't realize how much fear I was hiding behind jokes. Kathy nodded. Same. Watching you commit forced me to see how much I avoided choosing anything at all. Shelly felt her chest tighten. Not painfully, but deeply. I didn't do this to prove anything, she said softly. I just found something worth protecting. Larry watched the exchange quietly, hands folded, eyes attentive but relaxed. When Lauren finally turned to him, her expression was earnest. You didn't humiliate us, she said. You could have. Larry shrugged lightly. Humiliation doesn't build anything. You built something, Kathy added, even when we didn't deserve it. Larry met her gaze. You did the work. I just stopped the bleeding. They laughed, real laughter, unforced. After dinner, they moved to the living room, shoes kicked off, wine glasses abandoned on the coffee table. No one checked their phone. No one looked for an exit. Lauren leaned back against the couch. Marcus asked me what I want my life to look like in 10 years. Shelly smiled. What did you say? Lauren huffed. I told him I didn't know yet. But for the first time, I wasn't embarrassed by that. Kathy smiled softly. Caleb asked me the same thing. I said, peace, and didn't apologize for sounding boring. Larry raised his glass slightly. Peace is underrated. They clinked quietly. Later, when Lauren and Kathy left, the house felt fuller than before. Not louder, not busier. Just complete. Shelly leaned against the door after it closed. That felt like a milestone. Larry nodded. It was. She looked at him, eyes bright. This is what you meant, isn't it? When you said we had to fix the problem. Yes, he said. Not by cutting people out. By letting them rise. She laughed softly. You're not dramatic at all. I'm allergic to it. They cleaned up together, comfortable silence wrapping around them. When everything was done, they stood in the kitchen, bare feet on cool tile, the house humming quietly around them. This feels like a rehearsal, Shelly said suddenly. For what? For marriage, she replied. Not the ceremony, the choosing, the boundaries, the work. Larry stepped closer, resting his forehead against hers. Then I think we're ready. She closed her eyes. Me too. Outside, the neighborhood lights flickered on one by one. Inside, nothing glittered. Nothing rushed. Everything held. Chapter 9. Foundations hold. The morning arrived without ceremony. No nerves. No countdown. Just sunlight filtering through the curtains and the familiar sound of Larry moving around the kitchen, careful not to wake Shelly even though he knew she was already half awake. She listened anyway. The clink of a mug. The low hum of the coffee maker. the steady rhythm that had come to mean safety rather than routine. When she finally joined him, barefoot and smiling, he handed her a cup without asking how she took it. He never asked anymore. He just knew. "You're quiet," she said, mirroring words she'd spoken so many times before. He smiled. "So are you." They stood at the counter, shoulders brushing, no urgency pulling them in opposite directions. The wedding was weeks away, but neither of them felt like something was about to begin. It already had. "I talked to Lauren last night," Shelly said. Larry nodded. "How is she?" "Thoughtful," Shelly replied. "Uncomfortable. Still choosing." "That's honest work," he said. "She told me something," Shelly added. "She said she used to think you were boring." Larry laughed softly. "Used to." "She said now she thinks you're dangerous." He raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous?" "She said you don't flinch," Shelly explained. "You don't react emotionally to chaos. You just refuse to participate in it." Larry considered that. "That's not dangerous. That's disciplined." Shelly smiled. "To people who live on adrenaline, it's terrifying." Later that afternoon, Kathy stopped by alone. She looked different. Not styled differently, not transformed, but settled. As if she'd stopped bracing herself for disappointment that hadn't arrived yet. "I wanted to say thank you," she told Larry, standing awkwardly in the living room. "For what?" he asked. "For not rescuing us," she said. "And for not letting us hide behind jokes." He nodded. "You're welcome." She hesitated. "Caleb and I are taking it slow." Larry smiled. "That's usually how things last." When she left, Shelly leaned against the doorframe, watching her go. "They're not the same." "No," Larry agreed. "Neither are you." She turned to him. "Is that a good thing?" He didn't answer right away. He stepped closer, resting his hands lightly on her arms. "It's a chosen thing," he said. "That's always good." That evening, they sat on the porch one last time before the week swallowed them up with plans and logistics and well-meaning opinions. Shelly rested her head on Larry's shoulder. "Do you ever worry?" "About what?" "That marriage will change us." Larry looked out at the quiet street. "It already has." She lifted her head. "You don't sound afraid." "I'm not," he said. "Change doesn't scare me. Drift does." She smiled, eyes soft. "You've never drifted." "Neither have you," he replied. "You just didn't always know it." The night deepened around them. Somewhere down the block, someone laughed. Car passed. Life continued, indifferent to milestones, which felt right. When they finally went inside, Shelly paused in the doorway, looking back at the porch, the house, the life they'd built piece by piece. "I think this is what your grandfather meant," she said. Larry turned to her. "About what?" "Not going to sleep with unresolved issues," she said. "It's not about arguments. It's about not pretending things are fine when they aren't." He nodded. "Truth rests easier than avoidance." She reached for his hand. "Thank you for holding the line. Thank you for respecting it," he replied. They went to bed without ceremony, without doubt, without the weight of unfinished conversations pressing between them. The foundation held. Not because it had never been tested, but because every test had been met with intention instead of fear. And in the quiet certainty of that choice, Larry and Shelly slept, steady, unshaken, ready for the next morning, not because it promised something new, but because it would be built on everything they had already chosen to keep. Epilogue: What endures? The wedding was exactly what Larry and Shelly said it would be. Simple, intentional, honest. There were no dramatic entrances, no choreographed surprises. The music was chosen because it meant something, not because it impressed anyone. The vows were written carefully, not poetically, clear promises instead of grand declarations. Larry stood steady at the altar, hands folded, eyes warm. Shelly walked toward him without trembling. Not because she wasn't overwhelmed, but because she was certain. When they promised to choose each other, no one doubted they meant it. Lauren cried harder than anyone expected. She dabbed at her eyes, laughing through tears as Marcus squeezed her hand. Not possessive, not performative, just present. They weren't engaged. They weren't rushing. But they were real, and that was new enough to be sacred. Kathy sat quietly during the ceremony, Caleb's arm resting lightly around her shoulders. She didn't cry. She smiled, soft, settled, like someone who had finally stopped bracing for disappointment that hadn't arrived. At the reception, people commented on how calm the couple seemed. "How are you not nervous?" someone asked Shelly. Shelly smiled. "We already did the hard part." Larry overheard and nodded to himself. Later, when the music slowed and the crowd thinned, Larry stepped outside for air. The night was cool, quiet in the way that felt earned. Shelly joined him, slipping her hand into his. "You okay?" she asked. "Better than okay," he said. "I feel aligned." She laughed softly. "That's the most you answer I've ever heard." He smiled. "You married me anyway." She leaned into him, head against his shoulder. "You held the line." "So did you," he replied. Inside, laughter rose and fell. Life continued, imperfect and unfinished. But the foundation, built slowly, tested honestly, protected deliberately, held, and it would. because love, they had learned, wasn't proven in moments of spectacle. It endured in the quiet certainty of choosing well and choosing again and never pretending that respect was optional.